President-elect Donald Trump announcing that billionaire Elon Musk will lead a new Department of Government Efficiency alongside Vivek Ramaswamy. Musk has not announced plans to step down from his roles as head of Tesla, X, or SpaceX while performing those government duties. So what sort of corporate governance issues could arise here? Joining us now to discuss that and more, we've got Charles Elson. He is the founding director of the Weinberg Center for Corporate Governance. Charles, it's great to speak with you. I know that you have your own history of critiques on Elon Musk, which we're going to get to in the conversation, but I just want to start with your thoughts, your takeaways, and your response to this new role for Elon.
Well, it's a big role, obviously. You're not talking about advising on a little something or another. This is reforming the entire United States government, which is, it's a big job. Obviously, President-elect Trump has great confidence in him and his abilities to look at the government from a business perspective and suggest some changes. So it's going to be a lot of work. It's not, hello, here I am, goodbye. It's going to be, if he does it right, and he's got a co-chair as well, it's going to take a lot of time. And I think that's the issue. I mean, how can you run Twitter, X, SpaceX, and this? And that's the problem. Jack of all trades, master of none. And that's the governance issue here. Now, obviously, the other companies aren't public, though obviously X has some some debt that the bank's involved. But on the other hand, Tesla's a public company, and people, paid him a lot of money, or he's seeking, in this case in Delaware, as you know, quite a bit of money. How can you do both?
Well, what about the legality of all this, just in terms of the risks that then could potentially pose here to shareholders of Tesla?
Well, the problem is he has a fiduciary duty to the investors of Tesla as a director, and obviously as the CEO of the company, and which means his time needs to be spent there. And something that makes it impossible or very difficult for him to carry out those responsibilities would suggest either he has to leave Tesla or turn down the government job. I don't think he's going to turn down the government job, and I don't think he's going to leave Tesla. But of course, this is something up to his board to decide. Though this is, as you remember from the call from the case in Delaware, the board hasn't been viewed, at least by the Delaware judiciary, as particularly independent of him. And would they say anything? The mere fact that he took such a big role in the campaign and combined politics, in his business, if you will, is highly unusual too. And the board didn't object then, and I would imagine they're not going to object now. Basically, he seems to get what he desires, because if he says, if I leave, the whole thing comes apart. I doubt that, and I don't think you can base a business around one person like that, but here we are.
Here we are, and it's interesting because it sounds like, Charles, you're echoing this idea that we've heard from other guests too, that there's a lot of shoulds, right? Should Musk be running all of these companies and having a role in the government? That's not really for me to decide, but in a Trump world, I don't know that it matters.
He's going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And look, if this is not if he's not subject to any kind of congressional approval for the job, if it's simply an advisor, then who knows what happens next. Remember, Carl Icahn was an advisor to Trump in the last administration, and last time he was president, and there was no congressional approval. It was an advisory role. And it seems as though this is probably pretty much the same thing. I don't think Mr. Musk would want to go through congressional approval for a lot of reasons.
Charles, do you think companies should, maybe some of them do, just establish more guidelines in terms of political affiliations, what can and cannot be done? Obviously, Tesla might be a little bit different, just given the fact that Elon Musk was the founder and the fact that he is so ingrained and intertwined within the company. But just in terms of this situation happening again, I guess, how should boards be thinking about this?
Well, look, it's part of your civic duty. If the President of the United States asks you to participate on a commission or something like that, it's part of your civic duty, or an advisory group on business or in trade. A lot of people do that, and that's probably expected in the job as a CEO. This is different, though, because this is almost a full-time, or maybe more than full-time, 120%, given the task ahead of them to do. And at that point, the board should say, if you can't devote sufficient time to us, then you've got to leave the job. And I think that And frankly, but there's nothing wrong with leaving. Listen, you remember the former head of Exxon was Secretary of State. He left Exxon to become Secretary of State. He couldn't have done both. You have a conflict of interest there, too, because Musk, as you know, has government contracts. There's government regulation of the car company and the space company and whatnot, and obviously government involvement with X. And you've got a potential conflict of interest. Just by running these companies, and being in the government at the same time, do the companies get benefits from his service directly to the companies themselves? That's a problem too. It's conflict of interest. That's why typically you become a cabinet secretary or something like that. You stop your other business and you focus on this.
Well, Charles, how would it not, though, right? You have someone that's closely advising the president. He's going to be, you would think, as I think naturally people would, just in terms of pushing policies that are in his own best interest, and I'm sure he views it as in the country and the world's best interest as well. But it's almost impossible for it not to benefit his own companies.
That would be true. That's typically why, in most companies, where someone leaves a company, goes to government service, they put their stock in a blind trust and they sever all ties so that you won't have that issue. But again, if it depends on what he's doing. If he is simply an advisor who's sharing this commission, and has no direct authority over government contracting and whatnot, that's a grayer area. It's not a good idea. Frankly, the best way would have been to completely sever his ties to those businesses and take this job. But he was never going to do that. And obviously, the president-elect values his advice. He has created, or he has put it this way, disturbed more norms than any single business type I think I've ever run into. But and at some point norms do come back, and I think it's sad here they don't.
Charles, I just want to end in our final minute on Musk's pay package, which you have been a staunch critic of, and it impacted your own career previously. How do you think his pay package could be impacted by this? I mean, I have a lot of questions. He's going to get paid by the government. Like, what are your thoughts on his pay moving forward?
I would doubt that he'd be paid by the government on something like this. He'd be $1 a year person. I mean, he's got so much wealth that you can't compensate him effectively. Now, on the Tesla question is, does this impact the judge's rule? I don't think so. She's going to make it this month, I would suppose, or early next month, and we'll find out if she decides that the shareholder vote was invalid in ratifying the package. Now, then the question is, will the Tesla board come back and give it to him with something like this again? Particularly if he's not there. So that's a tough one. But that's the key to the board. That's why you want an independent board who has equity in the company, who works for the interests of the company rather than a relationship they may have with the person running the company. That's the sticky wicket in this particular case. And you've just had a new sort of a bomb thrown into a very sticky wicket. And, it's one of these, who knows how it turns out. But it is entertaining, that's for sure, for those of us kind of on the outside.
It certainly is entertaining. Charles Elson, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here this morning.